Windsor Castle, big green whirlybirds, Donald Trump's beast of a car, horses and gold carriages and soldiers dressed as if it's the 1890s, pomp and circumstance. But tonight, I want to look below the surface of President Trump's state visit and ask, what is really going on here? Isn't this a takeover of British democracy, this week's tributes from a vassal state? It's not just an unusually assertive US president who uses tariffs to interfere deeply in other countries' politics. It's also that American technology itself is reshaping Britain in ways we do not control. The real giants of the modern world are the big tech bros. Elon Musk called for the overthrow of the government last weekend. Peter Thiel's Palantir data company is deep into the NHS. He used to work closely with Peter Mandelson. Anduril, which Thiel co-founded, is deep into the British military establishment. Larry Ellison's Oracle is now underpinning how 4 major British government departments work. And so it goes on and on. I haven't even mentioned the private equity and the multinationals. Now, you might reply that from defense to data centers, from AI to social media, we need American help. But is the price fair if it includes getting rid of the digital services tax, allowing free access to our data and regulating much less? What about all of those British tech companies started here but being elbowed out? What about the social media campaigns driven by American-shaped AI and American algorithms which can shred the reputations of British politicians? Today, Keir Starmer, but also be absolutely sure one day whoever replaces him. America is a powerful ally. It is not a disinterested friend. I think the question needs to be asked during this presidential visit about whether our ancient democracy, like our economy, is becoming an obedient subsidiary of Trump's America. There's a lot of talk these days about the British Empire, good, bad, indifferent, whatever. But as this state visit showcases the last golden crumbs of our imperial grandeur, aren't we, to be honest, now in the position of local islanders grinningly displaying our native customs and humbling ourselves in return for some muskets and a smile from the new masters? Well, I'm joined first tonight by Angus Hanton, economist and author of Vassal State, How America Runs Britain. And I think the title gives away your feelings about this, Angus. But what about the influence now of these big American companies inside the state?
Absolutely. This isn't anti-American. This is observing what's really happening. So these huge companies, Apple and Microsoft and Google, they've just taken
Oracle and X. Oracle, we could go on and on and on.
Yeah. Exactly. They've taken over basically the structure of all our communications and our economy, and they profit by it, and the profits go back to the US, and control is in the US. So our Twitter could be seen as our town square, and our town square is controlled from California.
It's controlled from California, and it's not a fair town square in the sense that these algorithms are destroying the reputations of huge numbers of British public figures on all sides of politics. Fake news, fake AI films and the rest of it.
Absolutely. They're built to make profit.
And therefore the authority of government itself is being undermined by this. And ministers kind of sit there and smile as these deals are being done.
It's worse than that. They're welcoming the Americans, and they've been doing so for several years. And this government seems to be even worse than previous ones. They're absolutely acting as their handmaiden. I mean, if you're a vassal and the master comes over, you flatter them, you demonstrate your quaint traditions, as you've said, and you beg. And we put ourselves in the position of being a vassal in a way that we don't need to be.
So what's the other side? Because ministers will say, hold on a second, guys, these people are bringing huge amounts of investment in the UK. They support many jobs in the UK. Is it fundamentally regulation and tax that shows the dark side?
That's true, but actually the inward investment isn't what it's cracked up to be. One of the things I did was I spoke to the Office for National Statistics, and they said we lump all inward investment together, whether it's a new factory, which is quite rare from the Americans, or a new bit of plant, or whether it's buying up British businesses. So they conflate the two things. So as we have this sort of jumble sale of British assets and the Americans as you say, private equity particularly, but other corporations and the tech companies, as they swoop in, that's all treated by the government as benign inward investment, which it isn't. It's a sell-off of assets.
How much tax are we foregoing to these big American companies?
Tens of billions, and we're foregoing it in two different ways. First of all, their average rate of tax that they pay, because of various techniques, is nearer 10% than what the British company will pay. It's 25%. But we're foregoing a lot in other ways, in that many of the imports come from Ireland or Luxembourg or Holland. So these imports don't generate any tax on the revenue. So if you buy an Apple phone, that'll come from Ireland, and there'll be no tax paid on the profit.
And what about another thing I mentioned just there, which is the position of British companies? Because there are a lot of British tech startups, a lot of very, very clever and well-educated and formidable British tech people who are just being elbowed aside by these deals.
Absolutely. They're elbowed aside, or just occasionally they're very successful. And then what we find is that they get taken over, and the British government encourages those takeovers. It's not blocking them at all. I mean, in the defence sector, recently, Meggitt and Ultra and Cobham, which were big UK defence companies, were sold off to the Americans actually just before the increase in demand for weapons. But the same goes for tech companies that are successful. They get bought up because the firepower of people like Google and Apple and Microsoft is so great, and they're able, when they buy up our companies, to use them, to expand them, to use them as it were, a bridgehead into Europe, and sometimes a bridgehead into the Commonwealth countries.
So what do you think is going on in politics? You said that this Labour government is in some respects even worse in this respect than previous Conservative ones. Is it a mixture of fear about how weak the British economy currently is and, worry about how powerful Trump is? Are we, in short, being intimidated into doing these deals?
There's definitely fear and a feeling of powerlessness, but I think there's also something worse. I think they're complicit. And there's also ignorance, and they're in denial. So they're not willing to study what's happened. I mean, I sent my book Vassal State to all 400 Labour MPs asking for comments, and not a single one commented. Perhaps that's because
too embarrassing. Angus, that's quite a charge sheet. Thank you very much indeed.